Landowners are waiting to hear whether Summit Carbon Solutions will be granted eminent domain to build pipelines in the state. Our Iowa State Capitol reporter Connor Hendricks has a look at the bill that could halt the process.
The decision of whether or not Summit Carbon Solutions can build its 687-mile pipeline through 29 Iowa counties is in the hands of the Iowa Utilities Board. There's no deadline requirement to make it. While landowners are left waiting, some lawmakers want to stop it.
Freedom and property rights are inseparable. You can't have one without the other.
House Study Bill 608 would allow 21 members of the Iowa House or 11 members of the Iowa Senate to file a petition to pause eminent domain proceedings. To override it and let the process resume, it would take a 60% vote in both chambers. Also, the bill would allow affected landowners to expedite their cases in court. Republican State Rep Steve Holt of Denison says the bill would ensure eminent domain is being used only for the public's benefit.
I'm very frustrated that we even have to be here. We have a Constitution, we have Iowa Code, and it's in my party's platform that eminent domain should only be used for in very narrow cases for public use.
Republican State Representative Charlie Thompson of Charles City says the bill adds needed safeguards on the use of eminent domain.
The people of Iowa enjoy driving on I-35 and I-80. They enjoy having natural gas service to their homes. This is not about eliminating eminent domain.
Right.
This is about putting some due process safeguards on it.
Kathy Stockdale and her son both farm in Iowa Falls. The pipeline would cut through both of their properties. Stockdale says she supports the bill because she felt railroaded by the Iowa Utilities Board hearings.
After experiencing my first IUB hearing, the things that went on at this hearing, we need an oversight bill because this hearing was so slanted toward Summit and landowners were not respected at all.
While Governor Kim Reynolds has never publicly stated her position on the pipelines, the 3 IUB board members were appointed by her. In Des Moines, I'm Connor Hendricks reporting.